Hey everyone, on today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast, I've got Eric Siron back on the show, and today is one of our monthly threat review episodes. And in these monthly episodes, we cover the current threat landscape, some of the things that have been happening in the cybersecurity industry over the past month, and things that are related to that. So in this month's episode, we spend some time talking about the National Public Data Breach, what type of information was stolen, what types of attacks are we likely to see as a result. We spend some time talking about a joint U.S. government agency announcement / warning about the Ransom Hub ransomware. We talk about a curious case of extortion from a insider threat on a enterprise's IT team, and lots more on today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Security Swarm podcast, the podcast that brings you the knowledge and insight straight from the security lab here at Hornet Security. As always, I'm your host, Andy Syrewicze, and I've got Eric Siron on with me today. How's it going, Eric?
Doing good. How you doing, Andy?
Doing good. Hey, you've become my monthly threat report guy. So that's what we're doing again today. You always have interesting insights, and I mean, working, in healthcare IT, a lot of the stuff that we talk about in regular monthly threat reports, you have a unique take on it because, this may come as a surprise to some people, probably not, but healthcare tends to be targeted by threat actors a little bit more than some industry verticals, right? So anyways, good having you here, my friend.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Definitely. And so, folks, again, this is just one of our monthly threat report episodes. This is an episode that we do every month that we kind of have a guest on, Eric in this case, where we talk about the findings of the report. And we've changed the format of the report recently. We used to go over threat statistics every single month. So things like, what types of email attacks are most prevalent this month? How's it changed between the previous month? What are the most malicious file types used in email attachments, right? That type of stuff. And we found that it makes for a more interesting conversation to compare quarter by quarter as opposed to monthly by monthly. So now in the months in between, we focus on news highlights, thought leadership, that type of stuff. And so with that in mind, we will be having our first quarterly review since that change coming with next month's monthly threat review. So that said, Eric, we have a busy news cycle from the month of August to talk about here. A lot has happened, like is so frequent in the cybersecurity space. But the first one I want to start with is National Public Data, or NPD. I don't know how anybody could not have heard about this unless they were under a rock, right? And if you're not familiar,
as you said, it has been a busy news cycle, so
yeah, maybe. I suppose. Maybe chances are this drown out other things, though, instead of the other way around. And I mean, what makes this such a big deal is, let me back up for a second here first. National Public Data is a data broker, which if you're not familiar with what a data broker is, it's basically an organization that it is their business. It's their business model to acquire vast quantities of personal identifiable information. If it sounds like a bad idea, you're not wrong. And so this breach will actually highlight that point. And so National Public Data was recently breached, and they exposed quite a plethora of data. There's my Three Amigos reference for the show. If you don't know the Three Amigos, old movie, I remember there was a plethora of piñatas. There was that was a one-liner in that movie. Anyway, good comedy. Go watch it if you haven't. No, I've completely derailed. Anyway, there was a plethora of data stolen in this National Public Data breach, and it included things like names, email addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, mailing addresses, and that's one thing. But the vastness, the amount of it is another. It amounted to 200 gigs of data, 2.9 billion, with a B, billion rows of records, and 134 million unique email addresses. was pulled from this data source. And so I think the other really bad thing about this is people have been able to link individuals within this data breach, right? And so I've seen the argument, and it's true to a degree, that a lot of this information is probably already out there. But what I've seen talked about as part of this breach that I haven't seen before is the fact, like I said, people are able to link individuals within this breach. Like, for example, they look up Andy Syrewicze, and this is Andy's wife. This is Andy's sister. They can actually make those associations within the data set, and now that creates an additional risk of things like more targeted spear phishing, right? More effective social engineering because they know, what buttons to push for a certain individual. What do you think, Eric? Doesn't sound great, right?
It might be weird. My first thought was like, do you remember when you could give your mother's maiden name as a security question? And now if you do that, like everybody knows your mother's maiden name.
Right? I think the other one that comes to mind is make and model of first vehicle, which, with
We're still
Facebook.
trying to get to you about your warranty on that. Somebody knows about it.
Exactly. That's my point. You got, pictures posted on Facebook from who knows back when, right? Warranty stuff. That's probably a whole different conversation, is like, those security questions are not really security questions these days with all this public data out there, right?
No, they're really not. I mean, I guess for some of us Gen Xers and older, yeah, because we come from a time when our childhood and so forth were not documented like this. But no, millennials and definitely Gen Z and onward, yeah, you should be. It's hard to decide. And I will say, I guess since we're on the subject, the tip has always been to answer those questions with a lie that only you would know.
Yep.
So that way, somebody getting the correct right answer is wrong, but them getting the same incorrect answer as you is improbable.
Yep. Yeah, that's good feedback. The key is just remembering what the wrong answer was, right?
Which never worked for me at all. So I have to come up with other ways to. But
the other thing I've seen people do, and I think we've talked about it on the show before, is and usually this is talked about in terms of passwords and password strength, but like, okay, whatever your answer is, change your home position on the keyboard and then type your answer, right?
Oh no! Oh, that sounds.
I personally don't like that method because I don't know, I can't type from the incorrect home position on the keyboard, but some people actually do that. So
I think I could, but could I do it the same incorrect way twice in a row? I don't think I can. I can type for about a half a sentence on the and I'm off, but
oh yeah.
No, could I do it the same way twice? That's the part I'm not sure about.
I'd be curious, folks, if anybody listening has actually done that. That said, we are starting up a new LinkedIn group for all of our Security Lab content at Hornet Security. We're going to be posting some of these episodes there, and you'll be able to join that group, and we can have a conversation like this right there on LinkedIn. So I'm hoping, not promising, I'm hoping for this show, this episode, this will be the first one we post in that LinkedIn group. And I'll put a link to that down in the show notes. You can join and tell me if that is a method that has worked for you guys or not. So anyway, two big questions that this brings up, this national public data breach. And I've seen this talked about on the Security Now podcast. I've seen it come up in a couple of different articles, one on Bleeping Computer. Two questions, and they're valid. The first one, why do the United States and other countries continue to allow the mass collection of personal data by data brokers? Two, why do we continue to use easily abused identification methods like social security numbers for core financial means? Right. So when I go I go apply for a loan at the bank, I have to give them my social security number. Right.
Mm-hmm.
everybody's social security number has been out there, and it's been brought up in the industry time and time again. Like, hey, we could probably replace social security numbers with something that involves cryptography. That way, like a trusted key pair or something.
Or hear me out. Hear me out. We use social security numbers for social security and literally nothing else.
Right.
Crazy, I know, but
right. And so, I mean, this breach highlights both of those questions, right? Why are organizations like National Public Data allowed to sit on these troves of personal information? And have you ever tried to get your information removed from these? Yeah, you can go to a single broker and be like, yeah, get rid of my data. And they'll be like, okay, yeah, it's gone. One, you don't have verification that they have actually removed the data. Two, okay, move on to the next one of 80 different data brokers that are out there, right?
I guarantee the first one you started with will have bought your information from one of the others before you get to and you're just going to be chasing your tail.
Right. And I mean, yeah. I don't know if the number is 80. I just pulled that out of my rear end, but
probably,
I'm sure it's something like
small.
That. Yeah.
You're probably low, I would guess.
Yeah.
Just because think about all the people who are doing like background checks, like when you apply for a job, how many companies are doing that? Seems like I always hear about a different one all the time. Like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
And they're buying their data from here and there and everyone. Like at some point, the only thing we have to look forward to is your data is going to become out. It'll be like in the 90s when people were stealing music from Napster and whatnot. And now it's cheaper to get like an Apple Music subscription than it is to try to pirate your music. And so it kind of solved itself, except for the difference being, of course, the artists aren't getting paid. Sorry, artists. I am actually not okay with that. But in this case, that personally identifiable information, you kind of get to a place of like, well, something has to be secret at some point. What's that going to be? But, again, it comes back to we just give you this random number and that's your identification and you can replace it if it gets stolen, and which you can't do. You're changing your social security number is almost impossible, but then the rest of it is mainly, I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's almost impossible. And even if you lose like the official card, you're only allowed to like replace it twice in a lifetime, if I remember correctly.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Don't quote me on that, but I think I've heard that before. Maybe that's an old wives' tale, but
yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you don't need it so much anymore like you used to. Once you got it memorized, you're pretty good. But
yeah, I've seen a lot
of you carried around. Oh, you're applying for a job, and you would hand it to this stranger you didn't know, and they would photocopy it, and you didn't know where that was going. I remember all that.
Oh yeah,
we don't do that anymore. We still got to type it. But
it's been brought up in the industry a lot as a result of this breach. Like, why don't we do some sort of like trusted cryptographic key pair between you and the government? And when you apply for a job, there's a process that verifies you are the person that the government says you are.
Yep.
It's
almost like PKI was invented more or less for that kind of thing.
Funny how that works, right?
Yeah.
You and I should do an episode just on PKI and cryptography.
I am becoming really I don't feel like the world knows enough about PKI, and they treat it like, oh, I've seen administrators like, oh, don't talk search to me. It's scary.
It does seem like it's this big, scary, mysterious, difficult thing. But once you actually get down into the nuts and bolts of it, I don't know, maybe I'm weird. I think it's kind of fun and interesting.
Yeah. Well, part of it is you can scare people with the cryptography part of it. And I do think that's a special breed of people who can actually do cryptography. I played a little bit, that's beyond me. But the PKI stuff is like, as long as you say, okay, cryptography's here and it's part of it, but I don't have to know anything about cryptography. I just need to know about how to pass cert files. It's not bad. Yeah.
Yep. So I want to put a pin in that one. I'm going to have you back on to talk about cryptography at some point. So anyway, next item on our list is a rare, well, I say rare, it's becoming increasingly more common, but a joint U.S. government agency notice, announcement, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the FBI, CISA, the Department of Health and Human Services, And this is a agency. I actually had to go out and look what it does because I'd never heard of it before. The Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, MSISAC. So another government agency. So 4 different government agencies have released this announcement, this warning, basically talking about the breadth and scale of the Ransom Hub ransomware. So this is it's been around for a little while, but since February of this year, it has claimed more than 200 victims. And it's been a lot of different organizations, some critical infrastructure. For example, Frontier Communications was hit, Rite Aid, Halliburton, Patelco. I think I'm saying that correctly. Christie's Auction House was cited in one article I saw. I don't know what Christie's Auction House is,
Oh,
but
it's a big deal. That's not a
is it?
small thing. Yeah, that's a lot of big money flows through there. That's where
Gotcha.
if you have like a piece of the Ark of the Covenant, you would sell it through probably a Christie's or somebody like it. It's a big
Wow.
deal.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, some big names on that list, and that's just a couple, right? And so the written monthly threat review, I actually have a number of links where you can actually go out. I'll put the FBI's announcement link in the show notes as well, so you can go take a look at it. They give you all kinds of great information, behaviors, indicators of compromise, all that type of stuff. So you can go ahead and do what you need to do to keep your organization safe. Surprise, it's a lot of the usual stuff that folks should be doing, making sure things are patched, making sure you got MFA on accounts. I want to say that again. Make sure you have MFA on accounts. I have run into a couple organizations recently that are like, we'll get around to MFA someday. Just some posts I've seen in the community, and I'm just like looking at my watch. It's 2024. It's pretty soon it's going to be 2025. Who doesn't run MFA on their stuff? Or, if you have the ability, move to passkeys, right? Move to passkeys and you don't have to mess with MFA. But passkeys don't support everything yet, right? That said, somebody is yelling in their car at the radio right now saying, wait, don't I lose my multi-factor with passkeys, Andy? Actually, you don't. And if you want a little bit more information on that, check out the passkeys episode that we did on the show. I will put that in the show notes as well too. We did 2 passkeys episodes where we explain all that. So good
That's the
episodes
same
there.
root concept as the pin for Windows Hello.
Correct. Yep. So the passkey itself is one factor, but then you have to unlock the passkey somehow. And if you're storing the passkeys on the phone, your biometrics, is the second factor, right? So
Yep.
anyway, we dive into that in the passkeys episode. That was Jan Bacher I had on for both of those. Fantastic guy, super knowledgeable about passkeys, and was a great conversation. So check that out. Again, I'll put that in the show notes, folks. The next one is a very interesting story. It didn't make huge waves in the cybersecurity news, but when I saw, I kind of raised my eyebrows at it. And because I don't think a lot of organizations think about this. And we're talking about insider threats. Now, when we talk about insider threats, it's usually from the standpoint of like, okay, we're worried about a knowledge worker stealing IP, right, to sell to another organization, or maybe somebody in accounting trying to pull funds out of the organization or something, right? What about quote unquote trusted IT staff members? Well, there's a case that we talk about in this month's report where an IT administrator effectively held his place of employment ransom. So basically, shut down a whole bunch of accounts for the administrative team, reset passwords on a bunch of stuff, and was holding 254 servers effectively for ransom. He basically did that via a number of logic bombs that he put in the infrastructure. If you're not familiar with what a logic bomb is, it's basically a set of code, some function of some sort that somebody sets up that happens when certain conditions are met, like a certain time, right? Oh, on this date at this time, run the code, right? That's basically what a logic bomb is. And so in this case, that's how this individual had shut down all these accounts and closed off access. Basically, then said, hey, give me $750,000 or I'm going to shut down 40 servers a day until you do. Now, I look at $750,000 and why not make it $1 million, right? So, I mean, it just seems like an odd amount to me. That aside, it's kind of funny that this guy was caught because of implicating web searches, searching for things like reset password, PowerShell, Active Directory, and things like that. The FBI got involved, and it was a whole thing. They caught the guy, but it highlights the danger of insider threats, right? And you can't assume that the IT team is immune to that. And that's where things like PIM, privileged identity management, comes into place, right? And so if you're not familiar with what PIM is, PIM basically allows you to do things like, okay, Eric and I are on an administration team together, right? And Eric needs to make changes to this identity mechanism over here. Well, Eric has to apply for access to that. Me, as somebody else on the IT team, would get a notification. Hey, Eric is trying to access service X because of reason ABC. Is this allowed? I could go through a process where I could allow that for a certain period of time. So you could just-in-time administration is what that concept is called. And it also kind of goes hand in hand with just enough access, or GIA, and that is only the permissions needed to get the job done, right? And so that is one of the primary things I see used to combat this potential risk of rogue admins, right? Now, thankfully, I've never been in a case where I've experienced a rogue admin, not directly anyway. But Eric, I don't know if I've asked you this question before. Have you ever had to deal with that?
Kind of. And there's still some limits on what I can talk about in this, so I want to be careful.
Right.
Kind of, yes. However, that person was not trying to steal anything necessarily. They were deliberately laying low, so we got lucky. But
okay.
there were certainly the concerns of this person had access to a lot of things. What did they do while they were doing the thing that we are actually putting them in prison for? I know that's super vague, but
no. I mean, I certainly don't want you to divulge anything that you're not supposed to. That's not what we do on this show, right? But it's not like Darknet Diaries where I would, put a black screen over your face and change the sound of your voice or something, right?
Can you recognize me now?
Right. But if you haven't checked out Darknet Diaries, please do so. Fantastic show. Jack Resetter does a fantastic job. Anyway, but yeah, I see the concept and the problem of rogue admins coming up more frequently today now than it used to. And I don't know if that's because there's just more IT professionals than there was when we were younger, or what it is.
Because I remember, and part of, like, you're telling the story of this particular individual. I remember a guy who sat in prison somewhere in California for a while because he got fired and didn't like it. So he just changed his password to something only he knew and then wouldn't give it to him. Locked him out. You're done. You're not doing anything. They're like, we're going to put you in prison. He's like, okay, I'll go. I don't care. I'm that mad. Wow. Send me away. I remember that. This is not a new problem, and it's really, it's and I guess it depends on where you are and what's going on. But yeah, there's nothing strange about abused IT staff, and everybody's got a breaking point. And as you were asking the question, like, why did that guy go for $750,000 instead of $1 million? It's like, I bet what happened was something happened to him, and it was probably legitimately immoral, unethical, something, but not illegal. And so through his mental calculus of I'm going to get these guys back for what they did to me, that was the number that hit his.
Yep.
This is what they owe me, air quote, owe me, and I can't get it legally, so this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And
that really stood out to me too. I'm like, $750,000. Why not 500? Why not 1,000,000?
Yeah,
Like,
where did you come
why
up with that? And
750?
I promise he had some math going. Well, okay, I can't promise. I don't know anything, but my assumption is there was some math involved in that while he was talking himself into breaking the law.
Right.
I bet he didn't wake up and go, I'm just a criminal by nature. I bet it was more like they did me dirty and I'm going to get back what's mine. And yeah,
I guess maybe we'll find out as part of the court cases for that one.
yeah, who knows? I'll
We'll
probably settle and
have to
get it
follow up
done.
on that one. But
That'd be nice.
anyway, two other points that I wanted to cover here on the show. Won't spend a lot of time on these because we actually did podcast episodes on the show for both of these points. The first one I actually did with you, Eric, where we talked about vendor risk management. That's been coming up more frequently, at least in the circles I've been part of. And really what that comes back to is the concept of vendor overdependence. And I see it referred to a lot in terms of Microsoft 365, Entra. Vendor overdependence is the concept that, like, okay, I'm depending on one single vendor for so many of my critical business functions that if that vendor experiences something catastrophic, my business is heavily impacted, right? And so now that we live in a world where, like, okay, I don't have my own Exchange server on premises anymore. I don't have my own AD environment on premises anymore. I'm completely dependent on the Microsoft Cloud for those things. And I don't know, maybe tack a few other things on there. Maybe I'm using Power BI for business intelligence, and maybe I'm using I don't know, Dynamics 365 for some other things, right? If I am relying on Microsoft in this case for the vast amount of my business functions, well, when Entra ID goes offline, it's rare, but it does happen. I'm not going to be having a good day, right? And so, Eric, you and I, we did an episode specifically on that vendor risk management side of things. And I'll put that episode in the show notes, folks. But I don't know. Anything you want to add to that, Eric, before we move on to the next?
Yeah, so I was talking about somebody about this today. I don't want to go to a different version of OneNote because we do it in a lot of places for admin type stuff. I can't be trying to fix a problem with my internet connection using a OneNote thing that only functions if I'm connected to the internet. And then Microsoft's retort is always, well, it's cached. And I'm dead. And somebody needs to read my notes, but the internet is down and they can't log in as me, even though they have permission, but they've never opened it before. Where's their cache? They don't have a cache. They're going to have to, they won't know what to do. Whereas right now today with OneNote, I have a OneNote file sitting out on a file share that everybody in the group can get to at any point, dead or alive, internet up or down. Yeah. Trust me, I think about these kind of things a lot. This whole push to cloud only and depend on one vendor. And there's a whole lot of push to make us do that. I mean, people are not thinking that through to the end about, you're going to get to a place where you can't do anything, where your downtime, I don't know about you and where you've worked. Every place I've ever worked, especially the ones that have been around for a while, they have something called downtime procedures.
Yep.
That when the computer isn't there, this is what you do. And now we're going to get to the point where you won't be able to do anything.
Yeah.
You're going to sit there and twiddle your thumbs because you can't go paperless. There's something, everything is gone. Where it used to be, well, the odds of us losing everything all at once are pretty close to zero. But now, if everything is in Azure and nobody's thinking about, oh, hey, what happens if?
Yep.
We'll build in redundancy. Like I've seen entire towns go dark, cell, local phone, internet, the whole thing. I've seen them all go dark at once. This happens. This is a thing. And
it does. And don't get me wrong. I love Azure. I love M365, Entra. I think they're fantastic services.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, you have to analyze your risk, right?
And
they're not infallible services.
No, and there's a lot of people who are like, well, by going to Azure, what you're doing is you're saying, well, I'm allowing this geo redundancy and all better redundancy you can ever build in on-prem. Yeah, it is better than anything I can ever build in on-prem. But you know what doesn't go down when the internet goes down is on-prem.
Yeah.
You know what doesn't go down when Azure goes down? On-prem.
Yeah. And I think the other thing from an IT admin perspective, I put myself back in the trenches when I think about this. And maybe it's just my personality. Like when something's wrong, I have to fix it. Like I need to do something.
Yes.
When you are relying 100% on cloud services, you can do nothing.
You can do nothing.
Wait. and that
Yep.
is so frustrating for my personality type, because it's like, I
And I
just
work in
want
life
to fix
safety.
it. Yeah.
I work in life safety. I can't. That's
Yep.
just not going to happen. Period.
Right.
We will not do
Yep.
that. If it comes out and like, oh, this baby monitor to make sure the baby in the NICU is still breathing, that's Azure dependent. We're not buying it. You
Yeah,
can just
that's a
keep on
no-go
going.
there.
We're not
Yep.
going to do that.
Yep.
We don't like it when we have to connect it to like a switch room. Like, no, that chain of dependence is too long.
Yeah, because that's a point of failure there. That's a
Yeah.
whole
So when
other.
people are like, oh, we're going to make it all cloud, you got to go to the cloud. No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Too
Absolutely
many
not.
links in the chain.
Too many links in the chain. So you want us to depend on our nurses all catching everything? Is that what you want? And make them because they're not working hard enough? Is that what you? No, we're not doing that.
It all comes back to that. What's the level of risk for the given application, right? So,
Yes. And then life safety, the cloud is not going to be a thing. It's cool
right.
for like delayed stuff and aggregating. Yeah, fine, whatever. But no,
When somebody's life is on the line, it's another thing
completely
entirely,
different thing.
for sure. Well, the next item on our list, before we start to wrap things up here, is we also did a podcast episode on this. I had Ramon Bassett on the show, and we talked about kind of the history of election tampering. Was that Ramon or was that Umut? I think it was Umut Almdar, actually. I had one of those guys on. Don't quote me. I'll put the link to the show in the show notes. But we talked about the history of election tampering across the world, right? I hope I'm saying this right. I remember. I know it was Umut because Umut lives in Germany, and he made sure I was saying this correctly. One of the examples we looked at in that episode was the Russian attacks on the German Bundestag elections. Hopefully, I'm saying that correctly. But anyway, I dug into that particular case in that episode. We also talked about some cases in the 2020 election and the 2016 election here in the U.S., where some local election infrastructure was compromised, and a couple of other cases. So we are in the thick of election season here in the U.S. There were just a bunch of elections in the EU as well, the UK, France. And, I'm not going to kind of dig apart the whole issue like we did in that episode. Like I said, you go take a look at that episode if you want to, learn more about this particular conversation. But what I will add in this episode is, being that we're in the thick of election season, I think we're all on the lookout for those types of attacks. And I hope that municipalities are putting as much focus on cybersecurity efforts as they should be. That's just a hope I have. I don't have any empirical data to support that. That's just out of my gut. But, like I said, we did provide some commentary in a previous episode on that. We talk about that a little bit in this month's written report if you want it more in a written format. Before I wrap things up, Eric, anything you want to add on that point?
I'm thinking about all the small municipalities that I know are not doing very much, but also a lot of them aren't even really digitized that much. You'd be surprised at how not up to the 20th, 19th century even they are. So,
and I think a lot of states, I know here in Michigan where I live, what's it called? They do you have to fill out the little circles, and there's a collator machine that you actually put the physical ballot in, and it's kind of an analog thing.
yeah.
And then I think election workers then track that digitally after the fact. But there is a physical ballot that they can go back to if they need to do a recount, right? And not every state does it that way. Every state's a little bit different. And that often comes as a surprise to a lot of folks that are not here in the U.S.
Yeah. A lot of people have forgotten the word state means something. It has a very powerful meaning that especially even in members of the United States have also forgotten, but we are 50 separate countries who are bound under a federation.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, that's kind of the basis for the EU. They do the same thing. They're a bunch of separate countries bound under one federation,
Yep. So I will say that actually protecting the votes is one thing, but messing with the results and the communication of those results is another thing. So one of the attacks we talked about in that episode I mentioned is where I think it was Iranian threat actors had compromised the election reporting site for one of the southern states. I don't remember which one. And they were tinkering with the communication of the results so that it looked like somebody had won that didn't really win, and it created this whole cloud of like mistrust and disinformation, right? Which is a whole part of it, right? Anyway, a lot of good commentary on that in that episode, so be sure to check that out, or check out the written report as well. So with that, Eric, I want to wrap up with our predictions and our recommendations for this month, right? And of course, our predictions are election interference is likely to happen, and
Already
cyber
happening.
attack.
There was a something that both the DNC and the Republican National, not convention, the
Committee?
parties.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party and the Republican Party have both been hacked, and the campaign part specifically. That was in the paper. I don't remember when. So they've already been hit, and that's not even saying how many they've deflected. And 100%,
exactly.
100% that's going to happen. More.
Oh, for sure.
It's going to get worse.
Sure. Yep, it will. It will. So that is the prediction, is that that's going to get worse. And I don't think that's a stretch by any sense of the imagination.
Absolutely not.
The next one, and I wrote this prediction, and it's a little glimmer of hope in my eyes. I would love to see this, but I predict that the national public data breach is bad enough that it will hopefully reignite the conversation around data brokers at the U.S. government level. Hopefully.
Makes me wonder how people like you and me can start really banging that drum, and because we just need the voices to get up and go, this is not the way things should be.
Right. I mean, we can always talk to representatives, right? Of course.
We could, but a couple of mails, and there's got to be, anyway. Yeah, there you go.
My hope is, historically,
how do you make that a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Right. And historically, the U.S. government has not been really speedy on these data privacy issues. They're getting a little faster because it's become such a prevalent issue. But how long is it until we have something like GDPR here in the States? I know California has their own state law. I want to say one of the New England states has one too. Connecticut, Massachusetts, one of them. I don't remember which one. So we're seeing some state level laws that are like GDPR, but nothing at the federal level yet. So maybe we'll get there eventually with continued breaches like this. But by then, all the personal information is going to be out there, so maybe it doesn't matter. So in terms of recommendations, recommendation around the national public data breach, like we mentioned, it's going to make spear phishing and social engineering easier because of those data linkages in the data set. So those people within your organization that are most likely to be spearphished, your leadership teams, your execs, your finance people, your knowledge workers, at least let them know about this breach if they don't know about it yet, and let them know that it, some strange looking email from somebody's close cousin asking for personal company information, probably not legit, right? So just kind of communicate that danger there. If you haven't checked it out already, be sure to look at that Ransom Hub advisory from the FBI and those other government agencies. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And if you have not already, take a look at possible insider threats within your organization. Even you, yes, you, sitting on your IT team, take a look at your own team, because I know everybody is nice on most teams, right? But we have to account for that as well, too, for those rare situations where somebody goes rogue. So anything you would add, Eric, or I think we covered most stuff.
Yeah, well, I want to tack on. So we have, and I say and this is from the larger IT community in general, we have always said, check your passwords every so often, rotate them, do this and that and the other. What we have also learned is you need to go to that credit card you opened 15 years ago and find out what your security questions are and change those.
That is a really good point. I don't hear many people talk about that very often. That's a good point.
Maybe I've seen it once, but As soon as you
Yeah.
started saying, "Oh, we know who your relatives are," like, "Oh, well, they're," because there's like, who was the first person you did this with, or something like, you
Yeah.
know.
Very true. Very true. That's good advice, Eric. So, well, my friend, thank you for being on the show today and sharing your knowledge and insights. Always good having you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Definitely. And those of you watching, hopefully you found some value in today's show. And if you enjoyed spending your time with us, be sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Otherwise, you can find us on all the major podcasting platforms. So chances are, wherever you consume your content, you can find us. With that, we'll let you get back to your day, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Have a good one.